Okay, so before we get started, I just want to let you know what we can expect from the webinar today. For the next hour or so, we're going to unpack what insulin resistance actually is, why it can affect things like cravings, energy, and weight, and why simply trying harder isn't always the answer. And then towards the end of the webinar, I'm going to share with you a practical next step for those who might want to take it further, something that I've created to help you understand your own metabolism better and to actually start making some of the changes to improving your metabolic health. So my goal for you today is to leave with a much better understanding of what's happening inside your body and also what you can do about it. So for now, just be curious, participate in the chat if you can, and let's get started. So how many of you have ever known exactly what you should be doing, but somehow found yourself doing something completely different when the cravings hit? So you can stick your hand up, you can post some comments in the chat if that sounds like you. And I know, because I've spoken to most of you in person or know you quite well by now, that this is not a lack of trying. I know that you've all really tried hard to lose the weight. Hello, Sarah.
Jennifer, hello. Hi, how are you?
I'm good, and you? It's nice to have you here. Thank you for
I'm fine, and
joining.
good morning, ladies. You know what? I always struggle with Zoom, so that's why I can't switch on the
camera?
I can't switch on the camera. I'm not able to do anything. Even now, I've had to ask my sister to assist me, but I'll be leaving my sister's house now.
No
So it's really a
problem.
struggle. So I'll just listen. I won't be
You can
saying
just
anything.
listen. But if you
Okay,
you can post in the chat or let us know how you feel.
okay, I'll see if I'll get where the chat is, because really,
Yes.
I'm really struggling. Thanks.
Okay, no problem. So yes, Annie has I know that you go to the gym regularly, you've tried to change your diet and what you eat, and you don't always see the results that you're looking for. And I'm sure that's something that we can all experience and relate to. So I think what I'm trying to show you is that it's not that you don't know what to do. We sometimes start on Monday, we feel completely motivated, only to find ourselves by Wednesday, something's happened at work, or we feel bad about something, and we just go straight back to the things that we were doing before. We might try something different and lose weight, and then regain it a few weeks or a few months later. And the thought is that I know what to do, but why can't I just do it? Why can't I just stick to it? So it's not because we need to try harder. And I think all of us can agree that we've been trying. We have been trying hard. But before we talk about insulin today, I want you to recognize something. That if you've struggled with your weight, cravings, or energy for years, it's unlikely that you've simply never tried. And you've probably tried many different things throughout the years. Eating less, exercising more, cutting down on calories, or cutting out certain foods, counting calories, following meal plans, joining programs, and then starting over on Monday more times than you can remember. So just give me a show of hands or a thumbs up, put a comment in the chat if you can agree that you're not someone who hasn't tried to fix your health. It's not about failing and not knowing what to do. It's that the strategy that you were using is not giving us the result that we want. So if trying harder was the solution, wouldn't we have already solved this problem by now? Think about that for a moment. Because effort clearly isn't the missing ingredient. And we've already demonstrated that we can exert enormous effort when we want to. So the more interesting question to ask yourself is, what if we've been putting enormous effort into solving the wrong problem? So let me know in the chats now. Where have you been extremely disciplined and still didn't get the result that you wanted? I'll try and have it open. Yeah, I can see. So if you don't want to put your hand up and say, you can maybe just put it in the chat. Where have you been really disciplined and not gotten the result that you've wanted? And I know from chatting to some of you have got diabetes and struggling to keep your blood sugar level stable, even though you've been trying to eat healthily and exercise. Some have been relying heavily on exercise to lose weight and not seen any results, even with a personal trainer and changing diet as well. There's many different things that people have tried and not gotten the results that they've been looking for. So your body isn't deliberately sabotaging you, and cravings aren't a moral failure. Hunger is not a character flaw, and low energy isn't laziness. Struggling to lose weight doesn't mean that you aren't trying hard enough. And I know that those are a lot of the thoughts that we might believe about ourselves, that we are lazy, that we don't try hard enough, that we just don't have the willpower. So what if these are all signals from a system that's responding to what's happening inside your body? So instead of seeing them as an outcome or a reason why it's not working, what if they're signals telling us about what's happening inside? So when we discuss insulin today, we want to understand that it's important and that chronic metabolic dysfunction changes the way that our body responds to the things that we've been trying. So quick question, while we're doing this, I'm going to just share my screen and get ready for the PowerPoint. Before we dive into insulin today, before now, what did you mostly think of insulin? Or did you think that insulin was to do with diabetes? What were your thoughts on it? Had you even heard about insulin before? So most of the time, I think the purpose of what I want you to understand after today's webinar is that your metabolism is broken, not you. And so often we believe that we are broken, that we aren't trying hard enough, that what we're doing isn't working. But it's not about that, it's about our metabolism. And so I'm going to explain a little bit about insulin resistance today. And hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what it actually means inside your body. So before we start, we need to understand that our bodies have got three main fuels. We can use carbohydrates as a fuel, protein, or fat. So what are carbohydrates? They are chains of sugar that are linked together. They break down in the body and they raise our blood sugar level. All carbohydrates turn into sugar in the body. Most processed foods and drinks are high in carbohydrates. And in actual fact, it is not an essential macronutrient. Examples of carbohydrates might be bread, pap, pasta, beans, potatoes, rice, cereal, sweets, chocolates, many other examples. What we see when we look at this graph is how carbohydrates affect our energy level or energy. Then from energy, we mean how does it fuel our body? If we look at the red graph, we see a big spike in energy and then it comes down quite quickly. So carbs are always used first before fat. It spikes quickly and it lasts up to 2 to 3 hours. Doesn't last long. Proteins are in the yellow on the graph, and they're made up of building blocks called amino acids. And these amino acids are needed for the growth and repair of the body. Protein doesn't create a big rise in blood sugar levels, and they do most of the work in cells and are important for the structure, function, and regulation of the body's tissues and organs. Examples of protein, I think we're all familiar with what protein is animal proteins, red meats, poultry, organ meats, pork, seafood, eggs, and cheese, as well as some other examples. And then in the blue on the graph, it's fat. And fats are an essential part of the diet. For many of us, we've been avoiding fats because we believe that fat leads to heart disease and makes us fat and raises our cholesterol. But fat actually keeps us full for longer, and it helps the brain and other vital organs. For a long time, fat has had a bad reputation for making us fat, but this is not true. And so examples of some fats are rendered animal fat, olive oil, coconut oil, nuts, seeds, avocados, olives, butter, cream, full cream dairy products like full cream milk, yogurt, and cheese, fatty meats, fatty fish, organ meats, and then chicken with the skin on, and when we eat meat, eating it with the fat. So we can just see in this graph the way that these three macronutrients affect our energy. So insulin, as I said, it's a very important hormone. We all need insulin in our bodies, otherwise we would be type 1 diabetics. And insulin is a hormone that is produced by the pancreas that helps to regulate our blood sugar level. So it allows the cells to open up and absorb glucose from the bloodstream to be used for energy or stored away for future use. And when we get too much insulin, we call it hyperinsulinemia, too much insulin in the blood. And this occurs when the pancreas produces too much insulin, which is often in response to insulin resistance. So when we are insulin resistant, our cells become less responsive to insulin, and it forces the pancreas to make more and more insulin in order to maintain our normal blood sugar levels. So while hyperinsulinemia is often associated with insulin resistance, it is not necessarily the same as having diabetes, but it can lead to prediabetes and eventually type 2 diabetes if it's left unmanaged. So insulin is really important. But when we have chronic metabolic dysfunction, it changes how our bodies respond to different foods. So what we see in this graph, it's the same three macronutrients, carbohydrates, protein, and fats. But now on the left-hand side, it's showing us the insulin response. Okay, so in the previous graph, we looked at what glucose or energy in the body when we ate those certain foods, and now we're looking at insulin. So what we can see here is when we eat a high-carb meal, carbohydrate meal, we not only get a big spike in the energy or the glucose coming into our blood, but we also get a big spike in insulin. And it takes a while for that insulin level to come back down to normal levels after eating. So 2 to 3 hours for that insulin to come back down to normal. When we eat protein, we also have a spike in insulin, but it's not nearly as high as the carbohydrate meal, and it comes down a lot quicker. And with the fats, a smaller spike in insulin, and it comes down a lot quicker than with the carbs or the protein. Okay, so this is important when we're talking about insulin resistance. And how can we get ourselves to be more insulin sensitive if we are insulin resistant? So what happens if we have chronic high insulin? If we look at the bottom line, this is somebody who eats a lot of carbs every day. We could say they're a carb-addicted adult. They're eating multiple times a day because every time their sugar drops, they feel hungry again. And so that insulin keeps rising throughout the day. Every time we eat, it never quite gets down to baseline, and it rises and rises. And then maybe once we go to sleep and we stop eating, it comes back down. And as soon as we start eating again the next morning, that insulin rises again. And now that's going on all day, every day. compared to the graph at the top, where we see somebody that's eating lower carb meals. They're only eating twice a day because they're not getting hungry every few hours. And they only have 2 small blips of insulin throughout the day. And other than that, the insulin is staying low. Okay, so just have a think about that. And think about where you think you would fit in. Which pattern is more typical of how you think your insulin is responding? Sorry, I just had to go and close the door. Okay. So another important point is understanding basal insulin versus postprandial insulin after we've eaten. So in some people who are very insulin resistant, they might not be starting on a baseline of 0 or 2 or a low insulin number. They might be starting their day before they've eaten anything on 20, 15 or 20. So if we have already a high fasting insulin, and then we get very large spikes from the food that we eat, that is going to contribute to even worse insulin resistance. So how do we lower those insulin spikes? Okay, so we want to lower the insulin spikes and lower the basal, the fasting insulin level. Okay, and what we can see in this graph is that at the bottom in the orange, insulin number 2, that person has got low baseline fasting insulin levels. And when they eat, their insulin rises, which is normal. It's a normal response to eating. But in the blue, that person is starting their day at 20 units of insulin. So when they eat, and if they're eating a high carbohydrate diet, it's going to probably go up to 30 or 40 after meals. Okay. And so if we want to change our insulin level and lower it, what we're really focusing on is lowering our basal or our fasting insulin and not necessarily the spikes, because we are going to target the spikes by what we eat, but we're also wanting to lower our overall insulin level. Okay, so why have you ever eaten a meal and then found yourself thinking about something sweet or feeling hungry again an hour or 2 later? I'm sure that that's something that we can all relate to and that we've all experienced in our lives. So why does that happen? So when we eat a high carbohydrate meal, we release too much glucose into the blood at once, which is seen as toxic to the body, and we try and get it down as fast as possible using insulin. The more insulin we need to bring that blood sugar back down to normal causes our baseline insulin level to go up. And when that blood sugar falls quickly, it creates hunger. It actually causes hunger. So you see that the blood sugar goes up into the red zone from eating a meal high in carbohydrates. It then falls down very quickly and goes below the baseline for glucose that it was at, which triggers hunger and cravings, anxiety. Some people experience sweating, palpitations, an actual feeling of anxiety and stress in their body. And when we stabilize their blood sugar, then they notice that, actually, I didn't have anxiety, or I don't have these energy crashes during the day. And so this is the biggest problem that we have with eating high carbohydrate diets and lots of processed foods, is that you could have 1,000-calorie milkshake and you get a big spike in blood sugar, it drops down quickly, and 2 hours later, you're hungry again. Okay, and that's you ate 1,000 calories in that meal. So just understanding what the food that we're eating is doing to our blood sugar levels and our insulin is very important. So did you know that you can have metabolic dysfunction developing even before your blood glucose looks obviously abnormal? And this is really, for me, one of the big missing pieces that is so often overlooked when we go for blood tests and we see our doctor. They always do a finger prick glucose and they tell us that everything is looking fine. So what is actually happening in the slide? So if we look at the speedometer on the left, where it says glucose, the green one, the blood glucose there, it's in American measurements, 85. In South Africa, we would measure that as 4.7. It looks nice and low. It's below 5.5. It's perfect, just where we want it to be. And the doctor says, you're all perfect. Your blood sugar levels are fine. There's no need to worry. But the piece that is often missing is the insulin piece. And what we don't measure, and they don't often measure this, which is why at the end I'm going to give you a handout about what tests do we need to look at to know if we're insulin resistant. One of them is fasting insulin. And unless we measure the glucose and fasting insulin together, we're only getting half of the picture. So if we look at the speedometer on the right, under insulin, we can see that this person is needing a lot of insulin. Their pancreas is working really hard in order to keep their blood glucose level within the normal range. And in the top right-hand corner is the HOMA-IR, which is a calculation that we can do when we've calculated fasting insulin and glucose, and we get a score. And I'll show you just now, but that score there of 4.2 is indicating of extremely high insulin resistance levels in this patient, even though their blood glucose levels is 100% within the normal range. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So in this slide, the glucose is slightly higher. So it's not 85, it's 105. In South Africa, that would be 5.8, which is slightly more than the 5.6 that we would be aiming for. 5.8, so it's not even that significantly high. But insulin is low. It's sitting on 2. So if we work out the HOMA-IR for this person, it's sitting at 0.5. Okay, which is perfectly normal, and they do not have insulin resistance. They are actually insulin sensitive. So unless we're measuring insulin and glucose, fasting insulin and glucose, we're not getting a full picture about where you are in terms of your insulin resistance. We're only seeing half of the picture. So this is the calculation that helps us to identify insulin resistance. It's HOMA-IR. If you get a fasting insulin and a glucose on a lab test, they normally work it out for you. So less than 1 means that you are insulin sensitive, and this is this is ideal, optimal, where we want to be. Above 1.9 would indicate early insulin resistance, and anything above 2.9 would indicate significant insulin resistance. Okay, does that make sense? Any questions about actually calculating insulin resistance and what that means? So it's not about looking only at your glucose, but it's about what is your insulin doing in the background? Are we needing a lot of insulin in the background to keep those blood sugar levels within the normal range? Or are we needing very little insulin? So have you ever been told explicitly or implicitly by one of your doctors or healthcare providers that you just need to eat less and exercise more if you want to lose weight? Okay, or what I said earlier, they check your blood sugar in the rooms, you go for your annual checkup, they look at your blood sugar, oh, your blood sugar is perfect, but you know that something isn't right. You're struggling to lose weight or you're gaining weight. So now we can see why that explanation might be incomplete and how powerful that is, knowing that there are two sides and we have to look at both to understand our insulin resistance. So what does all of this matter? Why is it important? When we eat predominantly a high carbohydrate diet, it increases our insulin levels. Insulin and cortisol, our stress hormone, also have a relationship where if one is high, the other is high. And so increased insulin also increases cortisol, which is one of our stress hormones. And those two together lock away all this extra energy that we're eating as fat, which causes weight gain. We eat a high carb diet. We have increased insulin, increased cortisol. And that is the pattern that is then underlying metabolic syndrome and all chronic disease. And it actually drives chronic inflammation in the body as well. Because fat on its own is an organ that is inflammatory. And so the more fat that we're storing away, the more inflammatory markers we have acting on our body and worsening the metabolic syndrome. So we need to stop thinking about food purely in terms of calories, restriction, and willpower. And we need to start thinking about food in terms of its effect on our metabolic health. So we might have thought to ourselves before, how can I resist this craving And a new question to ask would be, why am I experiencing this craving in the first place? Think back to the slide with the big graph going red and then coming down into the green. And that is a physiological response that is going to trigger the blood sugar to come back up again. So it's telling your body, you have to eat now. You have to have that sugary food, reach for that next snack. That's how we experience craving. So why am I experiencing this craving in the first place? Another old question that you might ask is, how can I lose weight? And the new question might be, what needs to change in my metabolic environments for me to lose weight? So if trying harder isn't the answer, because we've done that and it didn't work, then what should we be doing? So we need to understand what's happening inside our bodies and with our metabolism. We need a personalized approach. We need to experiment with what works and what doesn't work. We need to implement, not just know. We need to actually implement some of the strategies, and accountability and adaptation help for us to make the changes and to make it sustainable for our lives, and really to bring down that insulin level and increase our insulin sensitivity rather than making us more insulin resistant. So this is exactly why I created my 6-week metabolic reset. And it's designed to take all of the ideas that we've explored today and help you actually apply them to your own life. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about it quickly. And then there is going to be an offer at the end. If this webinar today has helped you to understand that your problem with weight gain, hormone symptoms, brain fog, energy, difficulty losing weight isn't a lack of effort. Your body hasn't been working against you. And more power isn't the answer. Then the next question is, what can I do about it? So in my 6-week metabolic reset, it's not about just another diet where I hand you a meal plan and tell you to be more disciplined. It's a structured coaching program that's designed to help you understand your metabolism, uncover the factors that may be driving insulin resistance for you and metabolic dysfunction, and then put some practical changes into place. So over the 6-week program, we look at things like nutrition, how to fuel your body in a way that supports metabolic health and not goes against it or makes it worse. We look deeply into blood glucose and insulin so that you can understand what's really happening beneath the surface in your life and in your body. We address cravings and appetites, sleep and stress, because metabolic health isn't always just about food, movement, and understanding and using movement strategically to support your metabolism. And then we learn how to make it work in real life rather than just following another plan. And best of all, what I love most about this group program is the accountability and the support that we get from everyone else in the group that's going through similar things to what you are and learning and experiencing along the way. So because you've registered for this webinar today, and I'm really excited to have you here and that you've decided to join me, I'm going to be giving you my insulin resistance tests handout so that you know exactly which blood tests you can discuss with your healthcare practitioner if you want to investigate your insulin sensitivity and your metabolic health more deeply. If you don't want to go through your GP, I also offer blood testing. So just contact me privately if you would like to know more about that. I use Testaro and they come out to you to do the blood test. We don't have to go through a GP and pay for a consult. I get the results and then I can share them with you and explain to you exactly what they mean, which has been really helpful. And then the second bonus is that if you decide to join my next cohort, which is starting on the 1st of September of my 6-week metabolic reset, for everyone who's registered for this webinar today, I'm offering an exclusive 50% discount for the next 24 hours. So the full 6-week metabolic reset is normally 5,500 Rand. But if you join within the next 24 hours, so until 12 o'clock tomorrow, it's going to expire. It's going to cost you 2,750 Rand. We start together on Tuesday night, the 1st of September. We meet at 7 o'clock. It usually runs for about 90 minutes. And it's just a really great way for us to learn and share and be in a supportive and accountable group to help you see the changes and stay consistent throughout the program. So do you want to keep trying to solve this with more effort and willpower? Or are you ready to understand exactly what is driving your metabolic health and learn a different approach? If you're ready for the second option, I'd love to have you join me inside my next 6-week metabolic reset program. And I will share a link in the chat for you to go to secure your place in our next intake for only 2,750 Rand. So this is not about needing more willpower. We need to understand our bodies better and have a strategy that works with it and not against it. Okay, so I'm going to open up some time for questions and chats. You can turn on your mics and your cameras if you can, or you can post a question in the chat. If you have any questions about insulin resistance, if this makes sense to you, did it help you understand a little bit more about what you've been experiencing?
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Martha. Nice to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here. My question, man, what I picked up from everything you said is that there's a difference between being diabetic and your insulin tolerance. There's a relationship, but it's not the same thing. Is that right?
So it starts off as insulin resistance. And so I'll explain to you where diabetes fits in. So often, by the time you see your doctor, you might be pre-diabetic, which means that your blood sugar has started to rise. And that means that your insulin is not working as efficiently as it did before. So you're needing to make more and more insulin, but we are noticing that your blood sugar starts rising. By the time you become diabetic, your insulin is no longer able to control your blood sugars appropriately, and they stay high. And you might even be making a lot of insulin, but your blood sugar stays high. So we do have somebody that is diabetic on the group. That's Sarah, and she's got very high blood sugars. And so even though she's injecting insulin and she's taking medication to lower her glucose, it stays very high. So her body has now lost that ability to absorb glucose out of her blood. So when we're talking about insulin resistant, it's like the precursor to pre-diabetes and then later on to diabetes.
Okay, because that sort of explains a bit how basically the blood sugar test is different. Your blood sugar test is not really complete without knowing your insulin, resistance
The
level. So that
fasting,
means
absolutely. Yeah.
you really never know they're diabetic until it's pretty much too late,
Yeah,
So that was helpful knowing that it's a bigger picture than just seeing your blood sugar.
that's right. And then, Martha,
Okay.
also it's important to know that we get two types of people. So this is where your genes might have an impact. So some people might be able to they just have an ability in their body that they are able to make huge amounts of insulin. And so their blood sugar always looks good. But those are the people that become obese because they can just pack everything away as fat. Their bodies can do that. The person that becomes diabetic actually often doesn't get very overweight because at some point they cannot store that energy anymore. And that's what I explained to Sarah when I checked her blood sugar and it was really high. So all the energy that's come in is it's not able to be stored. It's staying in her blood, which is why her blood sugars are so high. And so they often lose weight, or they don't gain very much, or they don't get as massive as somebody that is what we call obesogenic, where they're able to just keep making loads of insulin and it keeps their sugar looking normal, but they get very big, compared to somebody who might have the genetic type for diabesogenic, or we call it diabetic. And they are the ones that would struggle in the end. I mean, our bodies manage for a time. And this is why it's so important, because for 10, 15 years, we might not realize how much that our insulin has risen. And so everything looks normal until eventually 10, 15 years later, our pancreas is like, I can't keep this up anymore. Why must I make so much and it's not working? And that's when you suddenly become diabetic. So it's not something that just changes overnight. It's been there all along. We just haven't taken notice of it. And the body at some point is going to say, I can't keep up anymore with the demand.
All right, no, understood.
But
Thank
great
you.
question, Martha. Thanks for asking that. And I think I hope that helps you to understand the difference. And you're 100% correct that by looking only at glucose, we're really only getting half of the picture.
Yeah.
And
No,
one
that
of my
makes
clients, Mandy, she lives in the UK, and she has actually asked her doctor for a fasting insulin, and he says that's not something he normally tests for, and he's actually never tested anyone for fasting insulin before. And so, that's a big concern if they're not, because it's not a routine. It's not something that they would check routinely unless you specifically ask for it. Yeah.
all right, no, got it. Thank you.
Thank you for joining. I hope that helped. Akira, did you have any questions?
Hi, no, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. Did it make sense for you?
Yes, it did. Thanks.
Pleasure. Sarah, what can you tell us from your side? Because you've also been on both ends. You've now passed the insulin resistance and you have got diabetes. Let me see if I can unmute him. Maybe she doesn't know how to unmute herself. Okay.
Hello?
Hello, are you
Can you
there?
hear me?
Yes.
Yes, Jennifer and the ladies. It's very difficult. I'm not used to Zoom. I'm more used to Teams. So I struggle a lot really on Zoom.
It's okay.
But anyway, yes. So yes, I've had a long battle with diabetes, and I'm on 4 types of treatments. I take 2 kinds of tablets now. I take 2 kinds of insulin to get my sugars down. But my sugars are not going below 10. They're just staying above 10, 17, 19.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get frustrated now.
Mm.
And like you said, once a person has got a lot of insulin in their blood or they're diabetic, I mean, I seldom gain weight. I'd recently gained weight about 4 kilos, but now I'm thin, just disfigured with big tummy, a big tummy for the kind, for my size. Because I look quite tiny, but I've got quite a big tummy. But yeah, it's a struggle.
And that is one of the signs. So when we're insulin resistant and it is visceral fat, that fat gets stored in our abdomen because actually the fat stores become full. The muscles are full of blood. We can't store any more sugar in the muscles or in the liver. And so the next best place to store this excess energy would be around the middle. And so often that is where we store it. So yeah, your sugar stays high because your body can't get rid of it easily.
And it's so bad such that even if I can wake up in the morning, at times I don't feel like eating, and around 1 o'clock I haven't eaten anything. And then I check my sugar without having eaten maybe since last night at 8 o'clock, and my sugar would still be high. It would be 19, despite or 17, despite the fact that I've taken all the injections and everything. So yeah. Mm.
And so that's why for you specifically, and I mean for everyone on this call, but what we eat is so important. So our liver also makes sugar. Even if we never eat any carbohydrates or sugar, we will still have the amount that our body needs because our liver can make the glucose that we need. And so what also happens in diabetics is that their livers actually make too much glucose. So it's not even about, then it becomes even more important to reduce the amount of carbs and sugar that you're eating because your liver is already making that glucose. And now you're eating more, it's going to go up. But yeah, that's something that we definitely, need to look at in terms of fasting isn't always helpful for people with diabetes because they do have to eat, but we need to eat the right things that are going to help your blood sugar levels to come down and not need all that medication that you're taking. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know it hasn't been an easy journey for you. And, it's also frustrating when you're doing everything you can to try and normalize your blood glucose. You haven't eaten and then you check it and it's 19. That's very, very frustrating. Annie asked, can someone be born with insulin resistance? No, not at all. So it's something that develops with time from eating too many carbohydrates. You can have a genetic predisposition to diabetes, or not making enough insulin or making too much, but we're not born with insulin resistance. And in fact, children are often, as we age, we become more insulin resistant. Children are generally very insulin sensitive. And it's not that they run around and are active and they can eat it, that's why they don't gain weight, but it's that their bodies respond very well to the small amount of insulin that they produce. So even if they do eat a sugary meal or a high carb diet, it comes down quickly and they don't gain weight. But that's not to say that that's also healthy because we have seen a huge amount of children nowadays that are obese and have insulin resistance. And it's purely from the food that they eat. So they are able to they just make a lot of insulin and everything gets stored away as fat. Okay, so I have put the link there in the chat. You can save it or just put it in your browser if you want to go and have a look. Yeah, are there any other questions or comments on that? Was there anything new that you didn't know? Can you identify with this insulin resistance? And maybe that is the missing piece for you that you haven't been aware of or unsure of how to fix it yourself. Henriette, if you're still there, maybe you can just give us Henriette was actually one of my previous group participants. Maybe she can just share a little bit about her journey, if you don't mind.
Jennifer, yes. I don't think I'm insulin resistant, but it was always that I gained some weight, and after I've been with you on that 6 weeks, and for me, fasting is helping. So if I can push it up until 2:00 in the mornings or in the afternoon, that helps. But yeah, sometimes I fall back. At the moment, again, I've gained some weight, but and that's just that I decided let me come here and just hear everything again,
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So, I mean, it did help you. And I think it is something that we have to keep coming back to because it's so easy to fall back into our old patterns. In my case, I'll just share, I had polycystic ovaries, which I didn't know was related to insulin resistance. And I tried so hard to try and find what was I doing wrong and why did I have this? And I was always fairly lean. So weight was not a problem for me. And then insulin resistance didn't come to me as it wasn't even a thought that occurred that I could be insulin resistant because I didn't necessarily fit in the pattern of what an insulin resistant person looks like. And what I've since learned is that you can also be lean and have insulin resistance. And in my case, I wasn't making enough insulin, which is why I wasn't gaining a lot of weight. But because I didn't have enough insulin, my blood sugars were elevated. And so just having those high blood sugars acting on my organs, my reproductive organs, instigated the polycystic ovary cycle and symptoms that I experienced, which led to fertility problems and difficulties. And only when I reversed that and realized what was causing it, and lowered my insulin, did all the symptoms of that resolve. So it doesn't always have to be that somebody with insulin resistance is overweight, and often they can also be lean, but still be metabolically unhealthy on the inside. Okay, so if there aren't any more questions, then I just want to say thank you again for being here live today. And for all those that did register, you will receive a recording of the webinar as well as the handouts that I promised. And thank you so much. You're welcome to contact me if you have any other questions, or if you're wanting to look deeper into your actual own insulin tests, you can contact me and I can help you to set that up. And otherwise, I hope you have enjoyed the rest of your day. And thank you so much for being with me today. Goodbye.
Thanks, Jennifer. Goodbye. Highly appreciated.
Bye, Sarah. Thank you for joining.
Bye.